Good morning, Blackstars. Let's talk about the right way to punch. Now, the real answer is there is no right way to punch. It's all entirely circumstantial. But there's a few ideas, a few key factors that you can look at that can help you determine what's going to be more appropriate for you. Now, granted, if you're studying a particular style, use the techniques found in that style. But there's a couple of ideas. First is going to be hand formation. Pretty much everybody does this the same. When you wrap your fingers down, thumb goes across the knuckles. In some cases, some people will have the thumb on top. It's fairly irrelevant. The problem arises when you have the untrained people using thumb inside. Real bad. If you've never thrown a punch before, understand that this is a very, very bad position. You do not want to punch people this way. Having the thumb pushed all the way down here, no good either. That's terrible. I see also a lot of people with their thumb just floating out. They understand make a hard fist, but they don't understand tuck the thumb. It's important that you stabilize your fist and of course condition your fist. You need to condition your fist. You can't just expect to have a fist hard as steel right from the get-go. You should be doing things like repeated bag work and pad work and sparring and various accessory exercises to help you develop your fist conditioning. Beyond that is going to be wrist alignment. Make sure that you have a nice straight line from your knuckles down your forearm. You do not want any kind of bend in your wrist. Now obviously the fist is wider than the wrist, especially on me, I've got small wrists. But depending on your punching style, you're going to want to either line up the big two knuckles or line up the middle two knuckles with your forearm. Now, in terms of vertical fist or horizontal fist, this is largely a matter of style and comfort. But let's just talk about a couple of things. First of all, the wall test. People who are proponents of the bottom 2/3 method, which is a very Chinese method, though Jack Dempsey recommended it in championship fighting. It's kind of an old school bare knuckle brawler thing in the West too. If you place your fist against the wall, a complete relaxed anatomical position, just raise your arm, make a fist, and place it against the wall. Your index knuckle will not be making contact. So if you're using a vertical fist, your most anatomically friendly position is going to be the bottom 2/3 method. If you're using the turned over position, you're going to find that the two large knuckles line up more. But once again, you have to slightly cock your wrist out to make sure that those knuckles line up. Otherwise, you're going to be doing some damage by adding shearing forces that will end up bowing the carpals. And you don't want to, well, it's really the metacarpals, but you don't want to end up bowing and breaking those. So you need to have that stabilized position to nail drive it. Once again, this is largely a matter of comfort, person preference, and whatever style you're studying. The other thing that's going to determine that is going to be elbow position. Once again, using neutral positioning, if I am stable and square and I raise my hands up, my elbows are mostly down, my fists are mostly vertical. If you have forward shoulder roll posture, if you are forward imbalanced, like most heavy bench pressers are, then you're going to end up with kind of a Barney Rubble posture. Am I too old? Did you watch the Flintstones when you were a kid? If you have that forward shoulder posture, you're already in a position of pretty major internal rotation. Internal rotation, external rotation. That being the case, when you raise your arms, you're going to be very Frankenstein, your elbows are already going to be out. understand that that forward rolled posture is not advantageous. It's actually due to muscular imbalance. It's not the natural posture of a well-oiled machine of a human being. Internal rotation is actually a very destabilized shoulder position here. Now, when you talk to powerlifters, what do? They torque their elbows down to about 45 degrees, which is the kind of the natural position. Obviously, with your fists on a bar, you can't turn to a neutral grip. But even with this horizontal grip, torquing the elbows down stabilizes the shoulders and puts the emphasis into the musculature and the structure as a unit, as opposed to just having the joint destabilized and floating and absorbing so much shock in and of itself. This is why a lot of boxers and karate punchers end up having shoulder problems later in life, because after years and years and years of thousands and thousands of punches with destabilized shoulders, they end up with problems. It's the same reason baseball pitchers end up with shoulder problems. Destabilized shoulder position plus force equals higher risk of damage. It's not a 100% guarantee of damage, just higher risk of damage. People have been punching and throwing that way for millennia, and it's been plenty effective. But I like to mitigate risk. However, the elbow out position, when I raise my arm to the side from a neutral position, my elbow is pointing back and my fist is down. Now where you can see. So there with my fist down, my knuckles are already turned over. So if I'm using a very torque heavy punching style, which we do in Savate, in fact, that torque heavy punching puts your shoulder so forward that actually you're in a fairly neutral and stable position with the elbow out and the fist down. If you use less torque, if you use more of that forward pulse and wave and a lot more forward energy like we do in Wing Chun, the elbows down make a lot more sense. Once again, it's a matter of style, personal preference, and comfort. One final thing, just to bring up the idea of the shoulder, I brought up the pictures. When you throw, you are exercising probably your most primal offensive capability. See, we crawled out of the trees to become hunters. And becoming hunters and finding out that we're not stronger or faster than most of our prey, especially the big ones we started off hunting, pretty much meant that we had to swing objects at them and throw objects at them, which led us to a lot of that kind of motion. Now granted, there are many different throwing styles. The sidearm throwing style is very nice, and guess what? We actually have a punch, we use it in Wing Chun even, where the elbow is down, the fist ends up being a little bit turned. The Russians are real big on that punch. Sistema uses them a lot. But most people have an overhand, not a sidearm type throw. And that overhand leads you to that forward roll, internal rotation, palm down, elbow out kind of physiology. When you're doing that, it's going to feel relatively comfortable because we're fairly well adapted to that. Problem is, as hunters, we would do that a little bit and then eat and rest, and then do it a little bit and then eat and rest. When you look at professional athletes, i.e., boxers, karatekas, and baseball players, people who throw for a living, the reason they end up with shoulder injuries and problems is because they're doing so many more thousands of repetitions, higher volume, and most people are pretty bad at rest and recovery. They could probably get away with it if they had longer spans of rest and recovery in between it, smarter nutrition, a better compensatory mobility work and all that. But the shoulder girdle is well designed for that. Those big overhands, that you see a lot of knockouts with, even in cage fighting, they're not particularly tactical punches. They are comfortable long ball punches because that big arc produces a lot of power. It produces a ton of power. It's just not very tactical. It's such a large, wide arc, they're fairly easy to avoid unless set up properly. But once again, and you've heard me say it, timing is everything. You can do anything if you set it up right. So it's almost an irrelevant point. Just being a nerd about this. So elbows down, elbows out is not really a right way. It just matters once again on your style, what you're comfortable with, and really your own personal anatomy and physiology, where how you've personally adapted, because regardless of your genetics, you have an individual adaptation in your own personal genome that's going to kind of determine the size and shape of your shoulder sockets, your hip sockets, your spinal alignment, and all that. So while you can do a lot to mitigate imbalances that may be naturally there because of your own unique makeup, start where it's comfortable. Work within your comfort limits and gradually push those limits until you find the red line. It's not smart to go over the red line too often, but once in a while, just to test yourself. But the fact is, find what's comfortable and understand that these different styles of punching are not really wrong or right. They're preferential. And as long as you're finding that you're delivering significant amount of power, able to return to neutral or continue offense or initiate defense from those positions, then obviously you're doing something okay. So I hope you enjoyed this clinic on the right way to punch, and please subscribe. I would very much enjoy your comments, feedback, and join me in the conversation. One last thing, whether you're punching with these two knuckles or the bottom 2/3 with vertical fist, turned over fist, nail drive with the middle knuckle. If you focus on the middle knuckle, everything else comes out in the wash. Because as long as that middle knuckle is nail driving linearly with proper wrist alignment, the rest of it should be fine. Talk to you guys later. Good journey.